any time that we feel a sense of overwhelm, our nervous system is struggling to cope with the level of stress that's happening in our environment. And we feel overwhelmed and we feel a loss of a sense of control. We begin to move into these states of activation. Our subconscious really takes over and begins to develop these different strategies to manage with this high state of activation, which is the ripple effects of trauma. So I think the first piece is beginning to recognize that some of our behaviors are stemming from trauma and that it doesn't mean that we're broken. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It just means, there's something here that would be really helpful for us to explore so that we can regain our sense of freedom and our capacity for intimacy.
Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
I will live every day as if there were a microphone tucked under my tongue.
It's great to get in the game, but don't get in the game till you understand the rules, till you're an insider.
Your life changes when you begin having a different conversation in your head.
What we need to do in radically deep problems is propose radically visionary solutions.
Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Julie Masters, and welcome to another episode of Inside Influence, in which I delve into the minds of some of the world's most fascinating influencers or experts in influence to get to the bottom of what it really takes to own your voice and then amplify it to drive an industry, a conversation, a movement, or a nation. Now, here's today's question. How do you respond to transformational tension? You know, those moments that form the space in between what we were and what we're becoming. The information that we had access to and what we know now. That usually deeply uncomfortable place where we can feel the change coming, but we don't yet know what the new horizon is going to look like. Most of us in those moments, we choose from a few responses. We either freeze, remain still so that the threat won't find us. We fight, start kicking and thrashing, either literally or metaphorically, or we bolt. We bolt and we isolate ourselves from the herd until hopefully the threat has passed. And in that sense, in many ways, we're not so different from any other creature on the planet. Apart from one important aspect, and that is that we as human beings, we have the capacity to first get curious and then decide exactly how we choose to respond in those moments. Now, in today's episode, we are going to be talking, amongst many things, about learning to sit with transformational tension, learning to stay curious enough until we have enough information to deliberately and consciously make our next move. And to do that, I get to welcome back one of my favorite guests from the podcast, also one of our most popular guests on the podcast. Coelle Simpson is one of the most highly regarded horse whisperers on the planet. A world-renowned coach and leader of Equus coaching movement, her work has been featured on Oprah's magazine, BBC Business Report, the National Journal, the OWN Network. She is also a TED speaker, as well as appearing on many other stages all around the world. Since 2006, the Coelle Institute has worked with individuals and Fortune 500 organizations all over the world to create transformational leadership experiences, all by using the lens of her journey as a horse whisperer to decode the silent language of authority. Now, why silent? Why the silent language of authority? Well, when it comes to building trust with a wild horse, all the best sales or leadership language in the world is not going to help. Charm and charisma don't work, and raising your voice generally has the complete opposite effect. Horses are listening to one thing and one thing alone: your presence, your ability to show up fully and yet with a calm intent, your ability to wait and hold space and yet still trust that you will lead the charge when it counts. Get it wrong, panic, overcompensate, and you may well meet the wrong end of 1,000 pounds of muscle as instant feedback. Which is why when I first came across the work of Coelle and the world of horse whispering and the lessons it has to teach us about leadership and the presence of great leaders, I had to know more. And one of the pleasures of having people on the podcast a second time is that I can let the conversation go organically wherever it needs to go. We've already covered the foundations in the first conversation, and this conversation we can just sit with whatever the conversation wants to take place. And today, it wanted to touch on these things. Dealing with transformational tension. Honoring the space in between becoming, what we are and where we are now, including all the triggers and instinctive responses that come with that. The importance of a healthy herd, what that looks like in nature and what that has to teach us about cohesion. We're at a place in the planet right now where we need all the lessons we can get about how to build a healthy herd, both in our community, in our society, in our nations, and at the world at large. And nature is one of the most interesting places to look for those lessons. How to stay curious and notice when we're activated. This is a huge one, and I love the language activated. Because once we figure out, once a trigger kicks in and we're like, oh, okay, I'm activated, there's energy here, then we can choose a response in alignment with the person or leader we want to become. Her own experiences after a recent life-changing surgery, including her surrender and the perspectives that gave her, and some of those quite literally took my breath away. And finally, how to use your body to create a sense of calm and safety, how to hold yourself in that way. And this is important, doing it first for yourself and then for those around you. I also murder some research on the mother tree phenomenon. Apologies to any experts out there. We're going to be putting some links in the show notes. If you're interested in that research, please check those out. Don't listen to me. It's a fascinating field. In terms of what I took from this episode, I can't say that it was a lesson or a tool really, more so just being in Coel's presence. The only word which I can use for that is just profound. Both times I have had the pleasure of being in her company, and there's just this stillness about her, which I'm sure you'll notice, this stillness and this sense of calm and deep, deep respect. And that is one which I would love to have more of in my own life. And maybe it's because words have never been her primary tool of influence, or that having been profoundly deaf for most of her life, she had to learn how to communicate purely through the presence of her being. Either way, it's louder than any words I've ever heard, and trust me, I have heard a lot. So what I've been thinking about since this conversation is this. Maybe that's the key. If we just stopped trying to find the right words for just a moment, if we lowered the volume of the constant tidal wave of noise that surrounds us and our interactions every day, maybe we could actually feel the impact of our presence as a leader, a mentor, and as a parent. And if we could feel it, maybe we could consciously start to create the type of presence that we want to have. Because if there is a muscle of influence worth strengthening, I 100% believe that the presence and the space that you hold is it. Now, for those of you who have some big visions for 2022 and are looking for a kickstart as a hot off the press announcement, that's about a week old, but I'm going with hot off the press. I will be running my last ever live Rapid Authority Masterclass. I run these Rapid Authority Masterclasses a couple of times a year. It's pretty much the only live public offering that I put into the marketplace. The rest of everything else that I do is behind closed doors with organizations, CEOs, thought leaders. This will be live. It will be virtual, so you can tune in from anywhere on the planet, assuming that you can make the time zones work, and we will do our best to make that happen. Why is it my last ever? Well, that's for another announcement, but some very cool things coming up next year. So if you want to make sure you're on the wait list, we will be opening the doors probably in the next couple of weeks. Make sure you're on the wait list. Head to my website, juliemasters.com, register your details, and you will be the first to know. Also, don't forget my newsletter, Influence Insider, which gives you one bite-sized tool, strategy, or mindset shift per week. I keep them short. I keep them practical, all on the topic of building a more influential life. Once again, hop onto my website to become an insider. However, for now, grab whatever caffeinated beverage you're into at the moment, or just plug in and hit the road safely, of course, and enjoy my second and hopefully not my last conversation with the incredible Coel Simpson. welcome back to the podcast, Coel Simpson.
Thank you. It's such a joy to be here with you.
It's such a joy to have you back. You know, we were talking as a team about what we wanted to do this year and who we wanted to talk to and who we wanted to invite, and it was an overwhelming vote to see if you'd come back on the podcast. So it's such a joy to have you here.
Thank you. That's so sweet to hear that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's always such a gift to me when we get to come together for these conversations and just explore, you know, and come to understand the world a little bit more and what's happening in our environments a little bit more. I continue to recognize that I feel such a interesting sense of sometimes overwhelm about this time frame that we're living in, and also a sense of deep gratitude of like, wow, we get to be alive during this time when so many things are in a time of major transition and reckoning and exploration and new discovery. And so thank you, for the opportunity to be here with you, spend time together and to explore some juicy conversations.
And I completely feel what you're saying about it being that duality, right? That friction between the two places. On the one hand, it's moving so fast. It's all moving so fast. It's all going in different directions. There's so many different opinions. There's so many different voices, so many different tools. There's so many things moving at a speed that neither we nor governments nor regulation nor even the media can keep up with right now or harness. But on the other hand, the natural energy and potential and opportunity that comes out of that, and exploration that comes out of that is just mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing. And for me, it becomes a question of the largest currency I have is my attention and where I place it. Do I place it on exploration? Do I place it on certain types of exploration? Do I place it on these conversations, on conversations that are held in this way, on these people? There's so much now. We used to have filters given to us. The government would filter things for us. The media would filter things for us. Our community, our churches would filter things for us. And it's like all the external filters have been lifted now. And that's a blessing and a curse. And we have to learn how to filter for ourselves, which I think this is the first time in human history we've really had to do that at the speed and the volume at which we have to do it.
I couldn't agree more. And I think for a lot of people, it's also recognizing that there has been a filter, just even realizing that so much of the information that we receive comes through very specific filters and structures that we're born into, that are given to us. Perspectives and cultural ways of being and belief systems. And when we start to come into a state of realizing, there's a diverse array of structures and perspectives out there. And, how am I going to navigate? And for me, just given my background and my relationship with animals and with nature, they've always been that guiding light for me. And I feel such a sense of excitement and a sense of calm when I look to the natural world and I see that, for some people, they may look at, let's say, a natural landscape and they just see, plants and shrubs and trees and vines, and it just looks maybe to them like chaos. And it's like everything's, exploring and nurturing and taking care of itself, and it looks like total chaos. But when we get curious and we pay closer attention, we realize that there is an entire harmony of relationships that are happening. And within that chaos, there is a greater intelligence and structure in which all of these different relationships start to form kind of a language of reciprocity. And when you look to the natural world, there isn't this dialogue that says you have to be a successful media person or lawyer or doctor or researcher. You have to earn a certain income or look a certain way or have a certain skin type or come from a certain location. They're living in an environment where there's immense diversity. And there is a certain amount that, is sort of this free flowing, what may appear to be chaos, but it's the forming of a lot of diverse relationships that to me makes up a network of stability and a way of being that is about reciprocity, so that, we start to form this very diverse universal village of how we function, how we live together.
I just love that language. I'm just sitting with that language, the language of network of stability. That because often, we look at our network and often our networks are the most chaotic things in our life, right? We strive for stability. We strive for, a straight line, preferably upwards in terms of our lives and careers. And it's often our network that is the chaos. It's something happens with a family member, something goes on at work, the economy changes, everything that we're connected to can feel chaotic. And, if we could just focus, then we'd be able to do, get done what we want to get done. And the idea of a network of stability is really interesting to me, and what that could look like. And another part of what you said there, which I wanted to dive into, which is there's no governing body. There's no governing body walking around nature handing out, speeding tickets or, commentating as the media would. And yet, one of the most fascinating things about me, and something I really want to dive into with you today, is there is leadership within nature. There is definitely leadership. And I found out something fascinating recently. I don't know if you've heard of this concept of the mother tree. So the research that's being done and finding that, there's within forests and woodland areas, they call it the mother tree. And the mother tree communicates via root systems with all of the other trees in the local vicinity, and can even kill other trees that come along that threaten her young or threaten her tribe by adjusting the makeup of the soil, by adjusting a whole bunch of things. But the idea that there's leadership there, you look at the trees and you don't feel like there's a network of stability, but there's a network of stability, and there is leadership. And what we can learn from the natural order of that, of stabilizing networks, stabilizing our herd, our tribe, and showing leadership within it.
I loved discovering the research and the stories about the mother tree as well. And I was just like, oh, this is such a validating piece of information that we're coming to understand finally. But I think it really, it speaks to the importance of having really a safe, thriving village of relationships, so to speak, and being able to have good relationship with our elders. That's kind of what's happening in the forest, is that older mother tree has seen and experienced a lot, and is providing that incredible amount of information, including nourishment for the betterment of the forest. And really, we have the ability to keep evolving and keep enabling each other to stand on the shoulders of giants, to improve our ability to navigate through the world, and how to inhabit a life that enables us to thrive. Now, that all sounds wonderful. We've been going through, in my personal opinion, we've been going through a time period that has been extraordinarily challenging for us to feel safe in human relationships. Most of the trauma that we experience is inflicted on us by other human beings. And that's not necessarily intentional. For the most part, people really are doing the best they can with what they have, with what they've learned, the way that they've been raised, how they've been taught. It goes back to those filters and structures that we don't even know we're living within.
What's the foundational move there that you have seen and witnessed? I know you've worked with a lot of people who have undergone significant trauma through the work that you do with horses. I know you've worked with a lot of horses that have gone through significant trauma. What's the first What's the first part there of repairing a healthy relationship with the herd?
There's two things that come to mind. One is becoming aware that a lot of what we're experiencing and a lot of our behaviors are a coping strategy to trauma. So most often people don't realize that their impulse for excessive shopping or the inclination to, to soothe with alcohol or, seeking one relationship after the next, or isolating, feeling a strong sense of shame, a strong sense of inadequacy. All of these things are really strong indicators. They're sort of like these little warning alarm bells that let us know that somewhere along the way, there was a challenging and traumatic event. Now, most people don't often think when they hear the word trauma, they think of a major accident, they think of war, maybe a death in the family, something like that. But the truth is that any time that we feel a sense of overwhelm, our nervous system is struggling to cope with the level of stress that's happening in our environment. And we feel overwhelmed and we feel a loss of a sense of control. We begin to move into these states of activation, and our subconscious really takes over and begins to develop these different strategies to manage with this high state of activation, which is the ripple effects of trauma. So I think the first piece is beginning to recognize that some of our behaviors are stemming from trauma, and that it doesn't mean that we're broken. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It just means, there's something here that would be really helpful for us to explore, so that we can regain our sense of freedom and our capacity for intimacy. Now, the other piece that's really important here in getting started in this process for ourselves is discovering what we need to form one safe relationship. We are highly social animals. Our nervous systems are designed to co-regulate with each other. And we, despite the cultural message that we're born into, we really can't do this alone. We were never meant to do this alone. And when we try, it doesn't work out all that well. We can isolate and we can try to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and, we can dig into our willpower and our sense of perseverance, but it comes at a great cost. And so we have to start to get curious about, what enables me to feel a sense of safety with someone and allow ourselves to open up to form one safe relationship.
I heard a beautiful quote yesterday actually on the radio that said, "Love's other name is understanding." And I just thought, I'm going to keep that, because I can easily fall into the trap of doing. Love's other name is doing. What should we do? What did you do? What should we do? What should they have done? What can we do about it? And, love's other name is understanding. It's just, as you've said, I'm here. I've got you. It's sitting silently with somebody in the rubble and just sitting with them. I've seen your work many times. And one of the things I've seen you do so beautifully through years and years and years of practice and feeling into it is use your body, which is a lot of what you're talking about here. How to use your body with somebody. It's not the words that you say, it's how you use your body. And when you're working with horses, you only have your body. You only have the spatial distance between the two of you and how you use it. What have you learned about creating a sense of safety through your body?
Our bodies are processing so much more information than our verbal conscious minds are. And if we can really allow ourselves to acknowledge that, then we can begin to realize it's pretty worthwhile to be curious about what we're feeling inside our own bodies and what we're sensing, this overall feeling state of what we're sensing when we notice somebody else's body. So when I'm working with a client or I'm working with another animal or with a horse, it's the very first thing I'm looking to do is create and support an environment of safety. So, sometimes that starts with just noticing breathing. What would enable you to feel a sense of safety? And how is it for you to just feel that I'm here with you? What is that like for you to just share some of the things you've said to me and just know that I'm here and I'm listening? Beginning to build that relational experience between our bodies and our presence with one another.
You're reminding me of one of the most powerful gifts I was ever given around my feeling into my own feelings and acknowledging where I was at and my ability to be able to relate to somebody else and the connection between the two. And I grew up in a household where, it was a beautiful household, but anger was not an emotion that was spoken about, discussed, or recognized in any other way than, the slamming of doors and the other noises other than words. And so anger was a really hard one for me to tap into and verbalize. I think I was in my early 30s and I was in a situation with somebody that I loved and I felt like they were threatened in some way. And I got really angry and tipped over the edge and verbalized it very loudly and kind of scared myself, verbalized it very loudly with somebody else in the dynamic. And luckily it was somebody who I still hold as very close to me now. And he looked at me and he said that, and I was just like blood boiling, steam coming out of my ears. And he looked at me and he said, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me. Being able to witness how much you love this person and how fierce you are in their defense was something incredible to watch. Thank you for bringing all of it. And I was literally speechless. The thing that I had feared the most, which was letting go of the reins of how I was feeling, had been not only welcomed, but admired by somebody else. The sense of safety. And I've never forgotten it as a tipping point for me, that this part of myself that I had considered to be, completely unlovable, the angry part, could be welcomed by somebody else, could be met with a sense of safety. And so since then, I've always tried to hold that container. It's not always easy, but tried to hold that container for somebody else.
I'm so glad to hear that you had that transformative experience because, oh my goodness, it's powerful. We typically, just as a species in general, we don't have a very good relationship with our anger. And for a lot of people, very similar to your story, come from a family environment where it's not okay to express your anger. And for other people, they may come from a family environment that was very expressive with their anger and everybody was spewing anger everywhere, but nobody was listening. So, anger in its earliest stages is this fantastic emotion that is letting us know that we have a need or we have a boundary. Either we have a need that's not being met or we have a boundary that's being crossed. And it starts, with this feeling of a little bit of agitation, and then it starts to build into something a little bit hotter and a little bit warmer until we get to full-blown anger and sometimes full-blown rage. When we start to realize there's something valuable here in the anger, and we have courage to begin to express it with each other. And you have someone, like the gentleman that you mentioned who was able to listen and receive your anger and not see it as a threat or an expression of rejection or, take it on as personal.
Well, that's the fear, right? That had always been my fear. And as it was coming out of my mouth at the time, I remember distinctly thinking, okay, well, this is broken now. Like I'm about to break it. This is my anger only breaks things.
That's right. And it sounds like, from your early background, your childhood background, that was potentially that sort of unspoken message that anger isn't acceptable. It's not expressed here. And if it is, it means that something's broken or something's going to break. And for a lot of people, there is a tremendous amount of fear around our anger or witnessing or experiencing somebody else's anger. And when we have the courage to get curious and just commit to staying with it a little bit longer and exploring it a little bit more, we can really transform our relationship to anger and recognize that it's an expression of a need or it's an expression of a boundary. And if we can begin to communicate about it a lot earlier than when it reaches that red hot zone, it doesn't become so destructive, doesn't become so painful. One of the things I love about what your friend was sharing with you when he was saying thank you so much for that passion and hearing you express yourself that way, is that we can finally feel each other when we include our anger and our irritability and our frustrations and when we include all of the emotions, we can feel each other.
I want to talk about the concept of a healthy herd, because I feel like, I woke up this morning to more protests on this side of the world. I read my newspaper on my morning walk, and there was more protests on your side of the world. And I feel like there's a very solidly needed conversation to be had right now about what a healthy herd looks like, its ingredients, individual contributions, and the leadership container that it requires. And, you have spent a lifetime studying that in nature when it works and when it doesn't work, and then how to repair it. So let's just talk about, what is a healthy herd? What does a healthy herd look, feel, sound like?
It's such a good question. And we're coming from kind of a long backlog, as I said, of trauma and things not being expressed. So what I experience right now when I look at the world around me and I try to make sense of it is that, in a way, the pendulum is sort of swinging on a big scale, so to speak, after being held back for so long. Now, there's a lot of people that have been marginalized. There's a lot of people whose voices have not been heard. There are many, many people who have felt unseen and who have been treated unfairly. And so, as a result, we have a lot of anger. We have a lot of anger in the atmosphere. There are a lot of needs that have not been acknowledged or honored or responded to. And there are a lot of boundaries that have been crossed. So now we're just starting to voice them, right? Like we're starting, all the different populations are really beginning to communicate to say, hey, this is so not working for me. I'm really not happy with this environment. This is not working. And right now it's noisy. There's a lot of expression of anger happening all over the place. And for me, when I see it, one part of me recognizes, okay, this is good. This is really good, because we're finally reaching the place where a lot of the populations and individuals that haven't felt like they could have a voice are at least beginning to feel safe enough to express their voices.
And that's part of the beauty of what we were talking about early on in this conversation as well. The dichotomy, the tension between the two, that this is a period of time where suddenly all voices can be heard. There are platforms and tools available with the digital world that mean that all voices can be heard. On the other hand, oh my God, all voices can be heard. That's a lot of sound.
It's a lot of sound. The thing that's I think really needed is for each of us to cultivate our capacity for empathy right now, for empathy and curiosity, and to allow, you're going back to your example of your friend when you got really angry and you were, in the expression of deep passion and standing your, communicating your stance. for him to have stayed engaged, to not just flee the situation, to stay there, to stay curious, to feel you, to see you, to want to empathize with you. It is a conscious choice. Once we start to move through our very sort of knee-jerk trauma responses, when we have one or two safe relationships in our environment and we feel like, okay, at least somebody gets us and we can, feel some level of safety. From there, we have to make a conscious choice to choose connection over being right. And that's about developing our capacity for empathy and our curiosity to want to understand each other. Right now, because so many people have felt unheard on varying different levels, the conversation is about who's right. Let me tell you and let me discuss about which is the right perspective that we should have here. And I hear that more as just that need to really get a lot of repressed anger out, get it off our chest and find a way to be expressed, and that deep need to be seen, to be understood. But it takes a lot of maturity. It takes a lot of courage to say, I'm not going to focus so much on being right. I'm going to make a real choice to choose connection and see what's actually needed here for us to get a little bit closer to each other and to feel safe enough doing it. Now, what do we need to cultivate that environment of safety so that we can begin to restore and repair trust with one another?
There's a quote that somebody gave me once, and it's one of those quotes that is true, but that you hate hearing. And that, every time you say it again in your head, you hate it just equally as you did the first time you heard it. And that is, do you want to be right or do you want to be in relationship? And you're right, it's a choice. It's a choice in every interaction, in every moment, regardless of the closeness of the relationship, from your life partner to your family to a colleague at work to the world at large. Do you want to be right or do you want to be in relationship? And if you want to be in relationship, what kind of relationship do you want to be in? And what does that container look like? And what would you need to hold for that to be true? And that takes a level of choice and responsibility that is really hard. It is really hard because, quite frankly, I love being right. It feels really good because I'm wrong often enough. So in those moments where I know that I'm right, it feels great. And to let that go takes a deep, deep commitment to what you want to create.
Yeah, I want to offer that it might just be kind of shifting our lens of perspective into recognizing that we get to have our own experience. Now, so coming back to the animal world again, if you take the experience of an elephant, so much of their life is based on scent and vibration. And their experience of the world around them, in their perspective, is going to be completely different than the fish eagle. The fish eagle that's flying over the savannas and the bushveld and seeing a very different vantage point. And its sense of smell is going to be quite different from the elephant. Right? And so we each get to have our own experiences, our own, life journey that has informed us and provided us with a unique experience. I'm thinking of a conversation I had with someone a few weeks ago. We were sitting down to dinner and they started asking me some questions about a project I was working on and developing some curriculum for supporting people that had been through trauma. And this was someone who made a comment to me, and they said, oh, I'm so glad you're doing that because then people can take up their sense of responsibility. And my head just kind of cocked sideways when I heard that. And I was like, oh, that's so strange. I would have never used that word. And they said to me, oh, did I say something you didn't like? And I said, well, I just noticed that I really don't resonate with that perspective of someone who's been through a lot of trauma, who just needs to suddenly take responsibility for their behaviors. I think I can understand where you're coming from, but it's not how I relate to what I'm doing. And they said, well, what's wrong? What's wrong with that? A real sort of combative, conflictive. What's wrong with what I said? What's wrong with people learning to grow up and take responsibility for their behaviors? And I just took a minute and thought, okay, we're coming from really different perspectives. So what I later came to understand was that this person on the other side of the dinner table had dealt with a challenging relationship where they had invested in this person going through a lot of therapy that wasn't terribly effective. And it was a very frustrating experience for them. And they felt like, they came away with just this feeling of this person just needs to, this kid just needs to grow up and get, some tough love, and then things will get better. And so I thought, okay, I can understand why you feel that way. When you don't have an understanding of the depths of what's going on. And from your perspective, it's just seeing an irresponsible kid who's taking advantage while you're shoveling out lots of money for therapy and it's not working. And so I chose, in a way, to kind of go towards the fish eagle, so to speak, and see like, what in the world is that perspective like for you? Can you tell me why you feel that way? And then hopefully there's some willingness to listen, on the other side, to reciprocate that ability to listen, which is, if you can hold some curiosity. We used to think in the medical field, we used to think that the way that you heal people is to cut them open and just let them bleed. If we could bleed them out, then eventually they're going to get better, right? We've learned a lot about health. We've learned a lot in medicine. Well, the same is happening in the world of therapy right now, and the field of psychology. We are learning so much about the ripple effects of trauma and how to work with it in more effective ways. And so, I began to share a little bit of that research and understanding of how it impacts our brains, how it impacts our behaviors, and some of those core pieces that we need to be able to restore our capacity for healing and transform some of these events that have happened in our lives. So, all of this full circle to, we could have taken a stance of, I know better, I'm right. And each of us has had a history and an experience and, firsthand experience that would have justified that feeling and that stance of I'm right. But if we kind of just allow ourselves to both acknowledge and get to have ownership over our experiences and stay curious, we can find the points where we can connect.
There's something in there around the word curiosity for me, and it links back to what you said before about being activated. That just beautiful word, being activated. When we are activated, when we tune into what happens when we get activated, what does my body do? What does my voice do? What do I immediately want to say when I'm activated? And when you start to feel that kick in, what happens is our curiosity leaves the building. Like as soon as you're activated, you're curious, like the frontal part of your brain shuts down, the primitive part kicks in. The primitive part of your brain is not curious. The primitive part of your brain is fight, flight, freeze. So it feels like a big part of this is the ability to be able to notice when we are activated, either take a step back or take a moment back away until we can reactivate our curiosity and then come back in. Now, if you can do that in the moment, fantastic. If you need a walk, great. If you need 24 hours, great. But to learn to be able to back off when that activation starts, as soon as we cease to be curious, okay, whoa, this is my cue that there's a better way for me to do this, and I'm not going to show up the way that I hope to show up right now.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. It's spot on. And the way that our nervous systems work, it just sort of really hijacks our conscious verbal ability to stay engaged and, communicate maybe in the ways that we would wish to when we're more calm. When our bodies become activated and we feel some sense of threat, we start moving in a way on an autopilot where we're just trying to cope with and deal with the threat. So the most important thing is to keep asking ourselves the question, noticing the signs and signals when we do feel activated, and asking ourselves the question, what do we need to feel a sense of safety in this moment? Because enabling us to realize that we need to change up the environment and we need to go outside where we feel connected to nature, or we need to squeeze our partner's hand or our friend's hand and know that we have somebody that's on our side, or we need to hear the sounds of the birds singing outside and just know that there's a whole nother world that's happening that's bigger than our own. Whatever it is that enables us to start to feel a sense of safety, our nervous system can then downregulate back into that parasympathetic rest and digest function. And when we're in that place, then we have access to curiosity. But you're spot on that when we're not, it's just not even in the building. It's just not there.
Even that term rest and digest, the ability to be able to digest somebody else, like digest somebody else's ideas, to digest somebody else's perspective. You can't do that either at a physical level with food or at an intellectual level with ideas when you're in that state. And also, what a beautiful question for parenting. What does this tiny human, large human, middle-aged human need to feel safe right now? Like what, regardless of the words that are coming out of their mouth, what do they need to feel safe right now so that I can model for them? Or what do I need to feel? That's just occurred to me. What do I need to feel safe right now and not panic for them or about whatever situation they've brought to me, so that I can digest what they're saying and model for them a place of calm and curiosity about the situation. I think that's one of the hardest things as a parent, which, I've been asked before why I bring up parenting on this podcast. I've been asked why I bring up many things on this podcast. And for me, there's a through line through all things. But parenting very strongly, how you show up as a parent, how you lead or influence a small person is exactly how you show up as a leader in your larger life with everybody you come across.
It is our relationship patterns, whether we're connecting with our children or our spouse or our colleague at work. There are a lot of patterns that are consistent across the board. So when we get curious about one, we're going to learn about them all.
And it's a great mirror with kids, I find, because a kid will let you, it's same, your work with horses, a child will let you know immediately if you've just got it wrong. Whereas adults in general, we tend to internalize more. You might find out you got it wrong a week from now. You might find out you got it wrong a year from now. But with kids, like right then and there that you approached that wrong.
Yes, they haven't learned to try to uphold that social filter for fear that they're going to lose you. They're more connected and still more engaged with the rawness of their emotions in the moment. And I have to say, I'm absolutely in love with the attachment theory work and understanding the way that we form connections in our early relationships, most especially with our primary caretakers. And it's not about being able to always show up perfectly as a parent. That just is kind of impossible. But when we start to understand that need for consistency and stability, and letting the child know that no matter what they're feeling, no matter what they're experiencing, that you're there. You're not going anywhere, that you still love them, that you're there with them. And it's okay to just have the experience that they're having, and you'll be right here on the other side of it.
I want to just tie what we're talking about now into leadership. And leadership in whatever capacity you lead, whether you lead a family, whether you lead a team, whether you lead a multi-million-dollar organization, and just look at what that looks like in its truest essence, what that looks like in nature. So when you see a herd, and every herd has a leader, I'm assuming from our past conversations, is that leader innate? Is that leader chosen? How does that leadership come about?
Well, I don't think that leadership is just innate. I think it is a skill set that we definitely develop. And for some of us, there's more of an inclination towards it than others. For some of us, our just natural characteristics are very curious about and inclined and engaged in wanting to bring people together, wanting to, explore where we're going, and help to provide a framework for that. And so some people are just very naturally inclined for some of those skill sets, but it is something that we learn how to do. We learn it by example, and we learn it through, stumbling around and trying something and then realizing, oh gosh, I wasn't really showing up with good vulnerability and empathy and listening in that moment. I was just trying to make something happen and, push it down people's throats. And so we do learn, hopefully, from our mistakes. And that's one of the things that is, a hallmark of any great leader, is that they keep testing and trying things and growing and learning and evolving themselves so that they can continue to show up within the herd, so to speak, and in a more effective fashion. But I think one of the pieces that's so beautiful about when we look at leadership is that it's not about showing up to be perfect or having all the answers or knowing what to do every time, or knowing what to do at any time. It's more about being able to be completely ourselves and to be able to be comfortable with conflict and tension and vulnerability. I don't see leadership as one person at the top of a pyramid that makes all the decisions. I see leadership as, when I look to the natural world, I see it as a incredible exchange of all of our unique gifts, and then structuring that in a direction that serves a greater whole. So I think that we all have leadership characteristics within us. Some of us, born with a little bit more than others, but all of us are really learning how to cultivate more leadership within ourselves so that we can come together as a collective. Because we're much stronger together than we are with this idea of individualism.
There's a dance there, right? I'm just going back to what you just said around, there's a framework. For me, you hit the nail on the head there. One of the pivotal roles of leadership is provision of framework. This is the framework that I have for this organization. This is our roadmap forwards. I don't know what twists and turns there's going to be along the way, and I don't know what's going to be needed, but this is my framework. And then if you can build a framework, the next part of the dance is, as you said, okay, what wants to form here? And whenever I've slipped up as a leader, whenever I've wasted energy and time and good talent, it has been because I have been determined to make my vision happen versus stepping back and going, what wants to form here? What naturally is coming to be here, and what naturally is trying to burn away, and how much energy am I wasting trying to put out every single fire and, damp down the other fires that I don't want, that are naturally trying to build something else. How do you do that, Dan? what does that dance look like in its best sense and its best self? The dance between the provision of framework and structure and the watching of what wants to form.
It's such a good question. And I think it's not an easy answer because there's just no straightforward answer to the question. It's about feeling our way through it. Coming back again to the intelligence of our bodies, that our bodies are processing so much more information than our verbal minds can shape a narrative around. And it takes tremendous amount of courage to say, all right, this was, this vision felt super clear a year ago or 2 years ago. We've been moving towards it. But my goodness, as we've been moving towards it, we've been learning so many different facets, and it feels like it's now taking a different direction. And so you have these moments as you're coming together in any business venture that are choice points. And we have to be willing to fail. We have to be willing to explore something and see how it feels, see what kind of traction we're getting, see what kind of, evidence we're getting. I often, when I'm sitting in those choice points myself, I often say to myself, okay, this feels like a really difficult decision. What would I do if I knew that I couldn't get it wrong? What would I do if no matter what direction this takes, even if it doesn't work out and, I have to dissolve the business or whatever it is, if I knew that in the end I was safe and I couldn't really get it wrong, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to show up to build important relationships. I'm going to respect people along the way. I'm going to keep gathering tools and resources no matter what direction I go in. So what would I do if I couldn't get it wrong? And that often always brings me right back to listening to the intuition of my body. And then I sort of try to always bring my team into that. Anybody who's helping and supporting me with that, whether it be family or business colleagues, or my close friendships. And as I'm exploring and discussing something with them, just letting my body guide me to, how is this really feeling? And do I have the courage to listen? It takes a tremendous amount of courage to slow down and listen. It's so much easier for us to want to just tick the box off and say, here, I accomplished this goal, that goal, this goal, and that goal. But to keep evaluating as we go, how is this feeling? Because we're not living in a stagnant, universe that everything goes in a straight line. We're living in a highly evolving, creative, sometimes very chaotic environment that's shifting underneath our feet all the time. So I think the answer to that question for me is always coming back to trusting in the greater intelligence of our bodies to navigate the unknown.
One of the most powerful questions I learned to ask as a leader over the many years was, what does your gut say? You'd have people come into the office, you'd get phone calls, and it would always be a story about a situation. This has happened and this has happened and this person feels this way and this is going to happen next. And at first when I was greener, you'd jump straight in and you'd try and fix it, right? Like you put out the fire, you try and fix it. You get a sense of, oh my goodness, I know what I'm doing. You get this incredible rush of, I can do this. I can fix this. But as time went on, I would notice the shift when you just simply answer it with, what does your gut say? And then you'd get this shift in state with the other person from the story, from, the thinking mind to a place of almost stillness, because they have to stop and check themselves. They have to stop and go, okay, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. And then the answer that came back was invariably a better answer than any answer I could have given, because I haven't been closely associated enough with the situation to have a gut feel. So to use that question and to use it for ourselves, with ourselves, when faced with those tough leadership moments of, what does your gut say? And I love that dimension of if I couldn't get it wrong, it was impossible to get this wrong,
Yeah.
what would I do?
Yeah. When we have that web of safety and web of like consistency and security in our relationships, we cultivate, a sense of community, a sense of village with each other, that somebody has my back. Somebody cares about me. No matter what happens, somebody has my back. And when that's in place, we can venture into the world and we can explore and we can fall down and scrape our knee. And, we know that someone's going to be there on the other side of it. And that enables us to be able to not strive to just get it right or to be perfect or to get to that end goal, but to open ourselves to really go on a phenomenal journey of learning and exploration, and to let that continue to inform us about how we develop a life that enables us to thrive.
This next question I have is in relation to your journey. And before we came on air, we had a conversation. I asked you how you were. And you gave me like the brightest, sunniest, most genuine, I am amazing. And it was one of the best answers to the question I've had for many, many weeks. And when we got into why, you were telling me that you've had a cochlear implant and your hearing has gone from single digits percentage to up to 89%. And how what an incredible difference that would have made to your life. But the thing that really struck me when you said it, and I think we talked about it briefly, was distractions. Was you had learnt over the past 10 years to really tune into how your body was feeling, how your gut instinct about what somebody was trying to say by the vibration of them, by the odd words you could pick up. You'd really tuned into that place. And then all of a sudden, the blinkers come off and every single sound can reach you. Every single noise, every bird chirping, every single distracting sound can reach you. Has there been a parallel there? And this is a bit of a convoluted question. Has there been a parallel there? Have you learned anything new? Let's start there. Have you learned anything new about how to tune out distractions and stay connected with that place of you that's tuned into other people by having that very distinct experience, by having no distractions in an auditory sense and suddenly having so many? That's
a really great question. I think in some ways I've been really blessed to have lost so much of my hearing for a large portion of my, life. I've been navigating the world through body language, through lip reading, through intuitive senses, through vibrations. And that has enabled me to notice things that maybe most people might not tune into. And it's been hugely helpful to me to be able to connect both with animals and with people. It's also been really difficult and really exhausting. I don't do well in busy, noisy social environments. And when there's multiple conversations going on, I have no idea which person's lips to read. And by the time I look around the group of people, I realize I've missed whatever was said, So it can be really challenging. And it can also be really isolating and lonely to lose your hearing. But now, as I shared with you this past year, I sort of was reaching the end of the road. It was either change my life into signing for the deaf community and change, my whole work into the deaf community, which would have been a wonderful adventure. But my world and my universe has sort of been built and operating in the hearing world. And so it would have been a very, very dramatic and significant shift for me. And I sort of thought, okay, well, here I am. I'm at a choice point. And my hearing is gone. So I either give this surgery a try and see what happens, or I go, and start start learning sign language and change the way I do my work. And it ended up being a pretty easy decision because I figured, well, if the surgery doesn't turn out that well, I still have signing, right? There's nowhere left for me to go. This is the end of the road. So the surgery was hugely successful, far beyond my wildest imagination. And the sounds are incredibly strange. So it is a significant adjustment. It's very mechanical, very tinny. Everyone sounds like a different variation of Alvin and the Chipmunks. The voices are very tiny, and it's quite a significant adjustment. But I prepared myself for that. So, I talked to a few people and I prepared myself that this was going to be a big change. And when it happened, I can remember my friend who was with me at the day that they activated the device. We got in the car and I was just kind of moving really slowly and taking in everything that was happening in my environment, because as you said, there was just so much sound coming in. I turned over the car and I was sort of staring at the air vent for a minute. And she realized that I was listening. I was like taking in the sound of the air conditioning. And she says to me, "What does that sound like to you?" And I just looked at her and I said, "Well, it sounds like a jet plane is taking off." Like the volume of it just sounded completely overwhelming. And she was like, "You might be the only person I know who would say something like that so calmly." So yes, the beginning was radically overwhelming. And to answer your question, I knew that I was going to be facing a time of transition. And like all transitions, we have to be ready to sit in transformational tension. So I basically invited my body to say, like, yep, this is going to be a big change. There's going to be some parts around it that are going to feel frustrating and overwhelming and uncomfortable. And that's okay. That's okay to feel that way. And let's just stay in the tension and see what happens. Let's just continue to stay in the tension and stay curious. So because I have learned to do that, and I was very intentional going into this process, there were plenty of times where I thought, oh my gosh, it would be so nice to just switch this off and go into silence. And instead, I just held that moment of the body is in a state of overwhelm. I feel like there's so much sound. It's catapulting me through the stratosphere. Everything's tense. My body is in that tense state of activation. It's totally overwhelming. And I'm just going to recognize I have the capacity to do this. I have the capacity to be in this tension and just feel what's happening in my body and recognize it's doing exactly what it needs to do. There's nothing wrong. Yes, this is what the state of overwhelm feels like. And there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my body. And it knows how to eventually begin to navigate this experience. And so because I was willing to give it that sort of focus and trust and stay in that transformational tension, suddenly the sounds I really wanted to hear rose above the chaos. The thing that I wanted to have an emotional connection to, what I wanted to feel a sense of connection to, began to pop out above all the other sounds. And it's been just a delightful year of developing the attention and the focus to do that.
There's so many parallels there. I think that experience that you've just gone through is a very intense version of how many people feel at a level at the moment. Can I just switch it off? There's so much sound, there's so much noise, there's so much happening. Where's the button? Can I dial it down and switch it off? And there's that choice point to switch it off, step back, stop showing up, hide, which sometimes is rest and reset, and that's great. And there's the other choice point, which again, you always have such incredible language, the transformational tension. Can I sit with the transformational tension long enough? Can I get curious enough about it? Can I hold back my fear that there's something wrong either with me or with everything or with the world at large long enough to sit with the tension and watch it shift itself, watch it move itself, watch which voices and elements start rising for me, start catching my attention and where my curiosity takes me. I just think that that journey you have just had is a beautiful experience and metaphor of something that we can all kind of drill into and take pieces from. Well, before I let you go, and thank you for sharing, by the way, I know that it's been a deeply personal experience for you. Before I let you go, what's the one thing for anyone out there who's wondering, can we create a healthy herd? If we're struggling to create healthy herds within our own communities right now, within our own countries right now, how do we create a healthy global herd? Is that so far off being possible that we should forget about it? Do we need to fly to Mars and start again? Which is what it feels like the general consensus is sometimes right now. Can we create a healthy herd right here, right now, on the planet we live in, with the global community that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it starts with creating that sense of safety. So recognizing that we are in a time of deep reckoning with a lot of, I would call them trauma patterns. And it's going to feel really uncomfortable. We're starting to wake up, we're starting to realize, and we're starting to express a lot of suppressed anger on all different topics and fronts. So allowing ourselves to be patient with this time frame, I think developing a safe relationship, getting curious about what you need to be in this time of tension and still feel a sense of safety. And sometimes we don't know that until we really sit with the question, and it changes and evolves over time. But just beginning to ask, like, what do I need to feel like it's okay to be me in this moment? Either what kind of permission do I need to give myself, or who might I need to surround myself with, or what kind of books might I need to read, or, things I want to choose to listen to or tune into that help me feel like, okay, despite everything that's going on right now, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know that there is a way to fix it, but let me just simplify this to what would enable me to feel safe. And when we start with that, we then want to take the next step, which is, can I connect? Can I cultivate one safe relationship? Can I start to cultivate one safe relationship with someone who really gets me, who I'm willing to deepen that sense of intimacy with? The more that we do that, whether it's in a business environment, friendship, romantic partnership, or, family, when we start to develop that space of safety within ourselves and feel that sense of that somebody has our back, our nervous systems settle down. And when our nervous systems settle down, creativity and engagement come back online. So right now we're in a sort of a global state of flight, fight, and then often freeze. And if we can focus on cultivating just for ourselves that sense of safety and a safe relationship, we're going to begin to have a domino effect of getting curious about how we empathize and connect with each other again.
Those two words, creativity and curiosity, that feel like they hold the keys to so many things, so many better places, so many magical places that exist and we have the capacity to tap into right now, but that we can't do in fight, freeze, flight, all those F words, including many more F words.
Yes. So true.
As Brene Brown says, fucking first times.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being you and your time and your sharing. It's been such a pleasure to have you back. One of the things I love the most about asking people back onto the podcast is that I get to completely drop my agenda. I had, 15 questions here for you. I think I asked to, because I don't need to set up the foundations of the conversation anymore. They already exist. And so we can just go in whatever place your curiosity and my curiosity takes us. So thank you for letting me do that.
Yes, thank you. It's such a pleasure to spend some time with you and to dive into these juicy conversations. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and have seized hold of at least one tool, idea, or mindset that will help you start raising your own level of influence. Now, for those of you who want to take the next step in your journey or would just love a roadmap to becoming the most influential voice, idea, or brand in your space, then I have good news. You can now download the latest updated version of my ebook, The Influencer Code, from my website, juliemasters.com. Also, there's a link in the show notes. Just pop in your email address, and I promise I will not spam you, but it is jam-packed full of ideas, tools, and case studies that I have come across in my now 20 plus years of doing this work, not to mention the 7 areas and 7 core questions that I have found to be hands down the most valuable when it comes to immediately lifting your ability to make an impact. Download it, keep it, share it, juice it for all it is worth. I hope it makes a massive difference in both your career and your business. Thank you always to my co-founder and the main brain behind this podcast, Lauren Kelly. You kick my butt in all the right ways. Thank you for making it happen. And if you did enjoy the show, then we would love you to share this podcast and leave us a review on iTunes, Google, Stitcher, whatever your platform of choice happens to be. And don't forget to subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode.